everyone, and welcome to the seventh episode of Coaching Gupshup with Smita and Kiwa. Today, we are bringing to you. Sorry, Smita, I'll wait for the yay.
Yes, go ahead.
Because after that, there's going to be silence.
Yeah.
Yes, you heard that right. Today, we are going to be speaking to you about silence. How does it feel, Smita?
It feels great to me. I think I personally have experienced the power of silence, and I have seen demonstrations where um, maybe it was whatever kind of silence, but I've seen the impact of that silence. So I feel great. But it's a bit awkward, I think, to talk about. I mean, it's good to experience it, but let's see how we how we go through this gupshup on silence today.
Yes, I think I have similar thoughts after having gone through coach training and experienced silence. There's been a shift, but at the same time, there are times outside of the session where I'm thinking, oh, how do I really practice silence? Do I practice silence enough? I'm not sure. But yeah, let's see where this goes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the first thing that comes to my mind when I think of silence is which gives me so much of peace is when I'm meditating, and that's moment of silence where it is not listening to anything, and there is no urge to listen to anything. It's really maybe just being with my own self and focusing on the breath or focusing on the heart, uh, or there's no focus. It's just that I'm just there, sitting in peace.
Wow. I was actually thinking about some awkward silences. Like a silence when, let's say, two people are talking, and okay, I'm talking to someone, and let's say I'm actually not listening very carefully, and there's this silence, right? Suddenly, because you don't know what to say next because you haven't heard enough. So I think silences are of so many different kinds, right? Like you said, an awkward silence or a silence that you actually plan for, like a meditation kind of a silence. What else?
Mm.
What are the other kinds of silences?
And I'm just thinking, like, when you said this, like when you have not listened to someone well, and actually you're thinking what to say, and there is this gap in between. So how do you manage that situation? What do you do with that after that moment of silence?
I mean, it depends on the relationship you share with the person. I think people who know you too well know that you have zoned out. For
Mm.
others, I guess, yeah, it's. I think maybe you add a line or something where you probably ask them to repeat, or you say, interesting," or something, and then you just try to get past this because you
It's
don't know
like
what to do about.
pretending.
Yeah. I don't know if it's
Yeah,
the best advice, but
yeah.
I've caught myself doing that. So
I mean, we are human, so it is possible that you can't be present and listening 100% of the time. Maybe there are situations like that where, yeah, no, that's
and
a
then there are silences, Smita, where you actually maybe run out of, like, maybe you're listening, but then you don't know what else to say because there's no further contribution and there's no other topic that probably comes in at that point. Like those awkward conversations you might have with somebody who comes over to your
mm,
place, maybe for tea or coffee, and you talk a little, but then after a while it's like, like, now what else?
yeah. And maybe you have a friend over, and both of you are kind of cooking together or making some stuff together, being creative together. At certain point of time, like maybe the communication through words may stop,
Right.
and there may be some silence, but do we think that the communication really stopped? Maybe not, right? Like maybe we're still communicating, but not anymore through words, but yeah.
Saying something very interesting here, which is even in silence, we are communicating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And are you able to think of anything else? Like I'm now that you said this statement about communicating still while we are silent, I think this is quite profound, right?
I guess I'm trying to actually go back to, let's say, the awkward moments or moments when there's a silence because there's not much to talk from both ends. You're still communicating something, right? Like
Mm,
maybe you're communicating that, okay, this is it, and we don't have much to talk about. Or maybe you're embracing that silence. Both parties maybe are comfortable in being in that space and just absorbing whatever has been shared. You don't have
yeah.
to always jump to speaking.
Absolutely. And it's like, even it can be that some conversation and something triggered from that previous conversation, right? Like before you just went on that silence moment together, and you're reflecting on the emotion or on the thought, and you're actually deep dive into it. So it's like, even though it might look to someone that the communication stopped, but whereas you're still on it, and you are pondering and going deep into it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I wonder that when the awkward silence that you said, it's like somebody may just think, right, like maybe she doesn't have enough to contribute, or she doesn't know much about it, and nothing else to contribute, like you said earlier.
Mm.
So these can be some of the things that where when you experience that the other person has nothing to contribute to that, like those can be the feelings that might just come up.
Very true. Like I've observed this while working in teams, right? Like there could be that one person who doesn't share enough and is
Hmm.
silently absorbing everything, reflecting. And one day they'll hear you, they'll probably say something really profound or something like very well integrated with what has been shared by an entire team. And maybe all along
Hmm.
you think that, oh, this person isn't participating, or maybe this person is zoned out, but actually they're introspecting and probably connecting the dots for themselves.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's interesting how different people also perceive silence differently.
Hmm.
Like I heard myself, let's say awkward at times, and we shared those examples. At the same time, we are saying it's a powerful tool uh, for communication. So I wonder, like, what are the different ways in which maybe our audience today, our participants today, whoever's our viewers today, perceive silence.
Absolutely. And the other thing was about that mindfulness, right? Like how does it help to help us to center ourselves? And sometimes, like, this is also about it also helps in self-awareness, like knowing myself better, which I may be a person who might not reflect or share only through words, but I'm actually experiencing all of that, knowing, becoming better aware about the other and self in my zone of that silence.
Smita, as you are sharing the coaches that we are, a thought came to my mind, like how we have levels of listening. I think we have like levels of silence, so it probably starts with first like the awkward silence where it's like, you are like trying to figure out the triggers. But then when you look within and go deeper, you realize that you're introspecting or there's a reflective thought. Then you go one level deeper where you want to mindfully actually create this space. And even within that space, right? To what degree do you want to create that silence? Like there are so many people who go for vipassana, right, which is like silence for a longer period.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And like rightfully, as you said, Kiva, about the team member who is maybe kind of reflecting and processing while being in silence, and how easy it becomes for us to just to jump on and say that the person is not there in fully, or not contributing, not participating, not doing enough, not being enough, and all of that. But whereas you know probably a few days later, you might see the impact of that silence.
Absolutely. I'm trying to think of coaching conversations where silence, it's like it's a tool that you actually learn. It's a competency,
Mm,
right? And I was just recalling the times when in the beginning it was so difficult to have that space, right? Because you think that you're the one who has to lead the conversation as a coach. And if there's a moment of silence, this means it's getting awkward for the client and you need to jump in with a very powerful question. But
mm,
how over time you learn, that silence actually creates, and this is something Draymond actually yesterday we had a discussion on ontology, the ontological pathway to coaching, where he spoke about uh, a very crucial role that a coach plays in that coach client relationship is to create space for the client, which probably they don't have in any other relationship,
mm.
right? So that space that comes in, I think I took it as something that comes in with that silence,
Yeah,
is where maybe the client begins to look within, reflect, actually see what is coming up for them in that silence.
yeah,
And the same for us as coaches on the other side, right? Because we are also absorbing, maybe not letting the triggers affect us so that we can respond and not react with
mm,
a question immediately.
yeah.
So
This share from you, Kiva, is I'm reminded of the theory framework, and when we see, right, in that you there is a gap in between, right? Like when we are um, becoming downloading the old patterns and letting go, and for something to let come, how that pause is important. And Otto Scharmer beautifully calls that as presencing. So in order for our that presencing to come, how that gap of pause and that silence is so key. And this is a beautiful share, I think, by Draven, which is about that space, and that does a lot of magic. And most of the times, the clients maybe are listening to their own words for the first time, right? While the coach asks that question and they are sharing the answer, maybe that is the first time they are themselves listening to their own know-how of things.
I
But
like
that's
what
so
you
beautiful.
said. Yeah, and Smita, how you drew that connect, right? To say that pause leads to like a deeper presence for the communication to then move forward, right? Because if
Mm.
that pause didn't happen, let's say even outside of the coaching conversation, in a general conversation, you'll just go on and on and on, and maybe there's actually nothing coming out of it. It's just, trying to pass that time. But if you
Yeah.
have that pause, maybe there's a course correction to something. It could be like uh, a relationship which actually gets formed and is deeper because now you're
Mm.
like moving, shifting gears to something else. So,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. That's really profound. I mean, I think that creating space, I really liked what you said. That space which was never given, and that can be created in that moment of silence. I'm now reminded of my kids, and like my elder one is just turned a teenager, and whenever there is this difference of opinion, and when I'm not like scolding, but when I'm just trying to explain something, and then I say, oh, like he will just go silent, and I'm like,
Mm.
why aren't you speaking? It's like I'm thinking. So that is something which is that's actually the right answer. Like he's not pretending. I know whatever I said, like the 100%, like of what I said, he's absorbing all of that, right? So somebody who would just say something immediately might also look like a kind of a reaction to a reaction, right? Like maybe I am reacting to something because of something happened, and if that thought will not happen, if that pause and silence will not happen, the other person is actually reacting to my reaction. And all that will happen in there is, a lot of chaos. I think it's wonderful now that I'm thinking of this,
Yeah.
that, I think he's doing the good thing by saying that he's thinking and being silent there.
Yeah. And also in connection to this, Smita, like when you're silent, one thing that you're doing is, of course, looking within. And at the same time, it gives you that space again to build a new perspective about the outside as well, right? Because now you're observing some other parts. You aren't just uh, like a while back we were discussing, not just using our senses of
Mm.
speaking all the time. Now you are maybe looking more closely or hearing more deeply because there's silence.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're building a new perspective actually altogether.
Exactly. And exactly that what happens in that theory you also, right? Like now when you are in that silence and when you're now going up the you, it's like you're listening to new things. You're, you're becoming aware of the new things which you didn't see before. And that's how the, future emerges in a new way. With all this, I'm just reminded of all the relationships, right? Like even in couples we see that, like, one of them will be very suddenly, like, and in my case I'm just sharing my personal example. Like when we have some kind of a discussion, like my husband would just go, totally silent, and that will trigger me all the more. Oh my god, like, why are you silent, why are you not talking? But later I would realize that, that silence actually was for good, because that gave me time to kind of reflect on it. And then when I come back to that conversation, it is like, with much more maturity able to handle that, with much more awareness able to handle it. And it's not like reaction to anything. The decision is taken from much more, from the point of much more awareness.
I'm enjoying the silence.
And I'm thinking of that quote where, it says, a fool is known by his speech, and a wise man by silence.
Wow. So,
So,
with this in mind, that now we discuss so much about silence and how it actually is a powerful tool to strengthen relationships and maybe strengthen your communication. Uh, what is it that you, Smita, would like to bring in to your way of operating, where you have spaces for more silence? How would you like to bring that into your way of living
like as a way of practice in my,
as a way of
uh,
practice? Yes.
yeah. Um, and some of it, what I'm doing is, like, whenever I have high on emotion, right? Like, I'm not saying negative or positive. It can be anything, right? Like any emotion which I feel, like extreme happy, extreme sad, extremely frustrated, or whatever. Um, to mindfully choose to be in silence, to choose silence. I'm just repeating on that word because I think it's really a choice. I mean, knowing that it exists and it's in your control to choose. I think I would just like to build on that more, and also, just give that space, that create space for others as well, that, when they are feeling or feeling high on their emotions, creating that space and allowing, the space for silence.
Yeah,
What do you
that
want to
sounds
do?
fun.
Yeah. What is
As you
your
were sharing, I was thinking that for me in a particular day, uh, I'm always doing something or always thinking of something. It's never like the mind is still. It's always on the go. It's still when it's tired. But
Mm,
I'm just trying to think what will it like when I create those spaces for myself, just the pausing and maybe I don't know if it's meditation as a practice, it could be something else as well. What will that shift look like? It could be maybe managing emotions better. It could be maybe some other creative thought might come in, which otherwise is just lying somewhere. It's not coming to the thinking because you're like busy with completing certain things. I don't know. I don't want to control what will come out of it, but yeah, I'll see. Like I'll try and practice these pauses and see what comes out of it.
mm,
And one more thing
wonderful.
that I want to try. Normally, the conversation, informal conversation, what I've usually observed is if a person is silent for some time, I feel like, okay, maybe this person is finding it a little awkward and doesn't know. So I always play that role of stepping in to, continue with the conversation and like take, bring in some, maybe some other story or
Mm,
something. But I
yeah.
want to not try and like take a pause there and see what really happens. Let's say when I don't, because I've observed this in a lot of conversations, like, okay, let's see what happens if I don't take that lead. Like, will that person maybe come up with something interesting? Let's see what happens. I don't know.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, in the five senses, if it's like just using one of it a bit less, and activating all other senses a bit more, and
Let's see.
maybe that allows space for more listening, more being aware of things, creating space for the other. So
Yeah. And for yourself as well, to
and for yourself.
strengthen that relationship with yourself as well.
Yeah.
So, amazing. All
Awesome.
right, then. I think on that note, we'll close out our Gupshup for today. And
Yes.
if there is something that you do to practice silence and make it a part of your lifestyle, in conversations or outside of conversations, do share with us because we'd love to hear from you on how you practice this very, very powerful tool of communication that we've discovered in the conversation today.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kiva, and happy Friday and a happy weekend. Thank
Yes, you
you.
too.
See
Take
you.
care. Bye
Take
bye.
care.
See you all.
Bye.
See you
Bye
next
bye.
week.